Sometimes you play a game that it feels like the designer is doing more than just trying to cobble some mechanics together to create an interesting distraction for people. What I'm talking about here is Industrial Waste. This is a game that came out in 2001, which is kind of a time before climate change was a very pressing topic on everyone's mind. So I feel like, the idea that this game tries to get across of companies should be trying to balance profit with being environmentally friendly. I don't want to say it was necessarily innovative in 2001, but it definitely feels like it feels different from other economic games that I've played. It feels kind of refreshing in its approach to trying to get you to think not so much about greed and just making as much money as you can. Instead, the game is about balance. You want to, sure, grow your company so that you become more efficient at producing materials, but you also want to make yourself more environmentally friendly so that when you produce goods, you don't make so much waste. And you also want to innovate in technology so that you become a more efficient manufacturer. So we're going to talk about industrial waste. So in industrial waste, the players are either factory managers or owners. The game says you could be one or the other, whatever you like better. And you are looking to maximize profits while also increasing the technological efficiency of your factory. And also kind of trying to keep tabs on your pollution output, because you don't want to be too unfriendly to the environment. Otherwise, the government will get upset with you whenever a disaster occurs as a result of your poor waste management decisions. So, to start the game, you've got this central game board here, and you'll take whatever player color you have and put your factory on the upper left space with the 14 and the 5, and we'll talk about what those mean in a second. You'll also take your 4 little wooden pegs, and you'll place them in the far left holes of each row on your personal player board, with the exception of the 4th one that doesn't go into a slot for the waste section down at the bottom, because you start out with 0 waste. You'll start out, everybody gets 5 raw materials that you'll store in your factory, 15 euros. The start player will get this euro piece to signify that they have the wherewithal to start the game. And that's it for setup. Okay, so here we have the central game board. I've got this set up for a 3-player game. What you're going to do is you're going to take everybody's factory and put it in the upper left corner here, and you're ready to go. This part going horizontal is the growth track. What it's showing you is the amount of euros you'll make whenever you fulfill an order. And so if you take the grow option, get your company like up to here, this is saying you'll get 17 million euros every time you take the order action and have the resources necessary to fulfill that order. This is also telling you how many victory points you're going to get at the end of the game. So if this were to be the end of the game, then this blue player will get 17 points for the growth that they achieved over the course of the game. It's worth mentioning right now that the end of the game is triggered as soon as one player reaches the end of the growth track. That will signify the final round of the game, and everyone will get an equal number of turns. So if the last player in turn order gets to there, then that'll be the end of the game immediately. Otherwise, everyone will get enough turns to finish out the round. Okay. If you look at the vertical track here, this is the worker track. This is showing you how many workers in hundreds your factory employs. And it's also showing you how much you have to pay in basic operation costs to keep your factory functional. So at the end of a round, everyone is going to have to pay to start out. They're all going to pay 5 million euros just as a fee to keep going. If you don't have enough money on hand to pay that amount, you have to take out a loan. This segues into us talking about loans. So here we have the loan cards. Every time you need to take out a loan, you'll take one of these. You'll take 10 million from the bank, and you'll hold this card in front of you to show that you've taken out a loan. You'll have to deal with that later on. You can take out a loan anytime you want. It doesn't have to be your turn. So when you're doing bidding, you can choose to take out a loan, just have more cash on hand. There are also these 2 times -10 that just shows that it's worth -20 instead of -10. The game does specify that you shouldn't be able to run out of loans, so if you burn through all of these because everybody is just loan crazy, well, then keep track of how many loans you have with pen and paper at that point. You cannot pay back a loan just when you have money for it. You have to take a special action to get rid of these. At the end of the game, every loan that you have is worth the negative number of points that it shows you on the card. So this one is worth -20, and this one's worth -10. So here you have the player board where you're going to show the personal information for your factory. To start out the game, you're going to take your wooden pegs and put them into the far left slots on each of the 3 innovation tracks. And you're going to take this 4th one and put it here in the 0 space of your waste, because you don't start out with any waste. And you're also going to get 5 raw materials to start the game, which you keep over here in this bin area. That's where you put your raw materials. At various points during the game, you'll get to take actions to increase the efficiency and technology of your factory. And the way that works is when you improve something, you'll take the peg and move it over a slot. And this shows that you are now more efficient in number of workers that you need to fulfill an order. This one would show that you become more efficient in how many raw materials you need to fulfill an order. And this one shows that you become more efficient in the amount of waste you create when you fulfill an order. So to start out the game, you need to be employing 500 workers, you will spend 5 raw materials, and you'll create 5 units of waste whenever you fulfill an order. So that's what would happen. That's not terribly efficient, and you'll find that you need to work on improving your technology pretty quickly in order to be competitive. So you'll notice above every peg that there's a top number and a bottom number. The top number is that number I was just talking about, where as you go down the line you become more efficient and you need fewer of that resource type for these 2 to fulfill an order, whereas this one is you create fewer waste on your way down. The number below each peg, however, is the number of victory points you'll get at the end of the game, depending on where your pegs end up. So if at the end of the game this one was here, this one was here, and this one was here, this would say that you would get 10 plus 15 plus 6 victory points for the level of innovation and technology that you've created over the course of the game. Down here at the bottom of the board, you'll see the waste track. It's broken up into 3 sections. There's green, yellow, and red. If the amount of waste you've created is still in the green zone, it's showing that you're fairly environmentally friendly. And if an accident occurs, no penalties will be placed on you, and you can just go about your business and nothing happens. However, if you are ever in the yellow section or the red section when an accident card is drawn from the deck, then you're going to be hit with some government penalties. I'll explain the accident card when I get to explaining what all the cards do. So, the way you're going to start a round is you're going to draw cards off of the deck and make columns of 3 equal to one more than the number of players playing the game. So in a 3-player game, you'll create 4 columns of 3 cards each, and you'll draw those one at a time. Okay, so the first thing I drew was the accident card, and I might as well just talk about that right now and tell about how you resolve that. There's only one accident card in the deck, and this is what it looks like. When you draw it, you sort of interrupt the round and handle the accident immediately. You'll look at everybody's player boards. Anybody who's in the green area of their waste, how much waste they have, is safe and nothing happens because they're relatively environmentally friendly. If anybody's in the yellow area, they're going to immediately have to pay 5 million euros to the bank and move 1 space left on the growth track. If you haven't done any growth yet, and you're still like on the 14 space, then nothing happens. But otherwise, you move back on the growth track. If a player does not have 5 million euros on hand, they have to take a loan in order to pay this off. So they'll take a loan for 10 million. They'll show that they have this card. They'll put it in front of them and pay 5 of it back to the bank immediately. So that's how you handle an accident. If you are in the red zone of the waste track, then a player is going to have to pay 10 million euros in fines and be moved 2 spaces left on the growth track, which is pretty penalizing. So this tells you that it's a pretty good idea to keep control of your waste, how much waste you create whenever you fulfill an order. It's a good idea to keep an eye on how many cards have come out of the deck, because there's only one of these in the deck, and if you've gone like 2 or 3 rounds without seeing it, then you know it's coming up, so you should try to get rid of some of your waste and kind of rein things in so that you're not going to get hit with those fines, because they're pretty damaging if you're not equipped to deal with them. The accident card will be set aside for the rest of the round. You'll carry out the rest of the round, and then when it's done, you take it and all cards that are in the discard pile and shuffle them back into the draw pile. So it is possible that the accident will immediately come up again the next round. That's just how it goes. Alright, so like I said, to start a round, you're going to start making columns of 3 cards, 1 more column than the number of players in the game. So we're playing a 3-player game here. And you do something like that. Just for the purposes of an example, I'm going to say that I drew this like this. If I had this one here, you can never have 2 of the same card type in a column. So if you ever did this, you would immediately discard the duplicate card and just draw a new one until you have 3 different card types in a row. So you're looking at these cards and there's just a lot of stuff happening here. So we're going to break it down one at a time and tell you what all the cards do. But basically the way a round works is you deal out these columns, and in turn order every player gets to take one for themselves, and this signifies the types of actions they'll get to take over the course of the round. Since this is 1 more than the number of players, whatever column doesn't get selected just gets put in the discard pile.
It is going again.
Okay, so this is the raw materials card. If you play this as an action, what you're going to do is you're going to take as many raw materials from the bank, not your personal supply, as indicated where you are on the track. So at the start of the game, everybody's at the 5. You can see it right here. So if this is where your peg is at, you're going to take 5 pieces from the bank and set them up, and you're going to be doing an auction. The winning bidder will get to take this many raw materials and place them in their personal supply. You are an active participant in this auction, so even though you are the one who's initiated the selling, you can end up being the one who buys them. Everyone gets, starting with the player to your left, so you go clockwise, everyone gets one chance to place a bid or pass. At the end of that, whoever has bid the most gets these resources, and they take them in their personal supply. They will pay you the amount that they bid on them, unless you are the person who had the highest bid, in which case you will pay that money to the bank, and you'll get those goods. I will mention that a player may not bid more than he has in cash, but since you can take out a loan anytime you want, if you want the bid to be higher, you just take out a loan and then you have more cash on hand. So that's how that works. So this is the order card, and when you execute an order action, what you're going to do is you're going to first produce goods and then immediately sell them. And the way that works is you look at this point right here, and you're going to take as many raw materials from your personal supply as indicated by the position of your peg, and you're going to return them to the bank. You also need to have this many employees in your factory in order to take an order action. And then you're going to be paid the amounts of money indicated by where you are on the growth track, and you will create waste equal to the position of this peg down here. So I do that, and if this is the start of the game, you're still in the upper left corner of the main board, which means you're going to get 14 million euros for producing an order, and it's going to cost you 5 resources. So that's how that works. The next action card is growth, and this one's real simple. All you do when you play this card is you're going to take your factory and move it one space to the right. This shows that you've grown as a company. It means that you're going to make more money with every order you produce, and you're going to be getting more victory points at the end of the game. The next action card is hiring and firing, and this one allows you to adjust the position of your factory vertically. You're not limited to... You can fire employees regardless of what position you are in your personal factory board, but it's worth noting that if you haven't innovated in rationalization yet and your employee track is still at 5, but you have fired 100 people, that means that you do not have enough employees to produce any goods. So theoretically, your position here should more or less correlate to your position on the top part of your player board. However, if you are projecting that you're going to be rationalizing in the future, you might do this just to drop the operating cost of your factory, because that's the other thing this never correlates to. And if it's not obvious, it shows an up and down on the card. You can hire and fire one or the other with this card. It's just whichever direction you want to go with it. The next action card is innovation. It looks like this little computer terminal. What happens here is you get to pay 5 million euros to the bank and move one of your pegs one space to the right. This shows that you've improved the efficiency of your company. The next action card is waste disposal. It's this one that's kind of got the redder background to it. What you're going to do when you do waste disposal is you're going to take the amount of waste you've created and move it back 3 spaces. I guess it's worth noting that you can't move it into negative territory, so once you get to the 0, you just stop there. Next one is waste removal, which when you start playing the game, you might get waste disposal and waste removal mixed up, but this one's the yellow background one. And what this does is it allows you to move back 1 on the amount of waste that you have, and you also target all the other players in the game and make them increase their track by 1. So you are effectively dumping some of your garbage in their backyard and making them deal with it. It doesn't matter how many players are in the game, everybody increases their track by 1 while you reduce by just 1.
It's not environmentally conscious at all.
Next card is the bribery card. And this card is not actively played. The way it works is if you have it in your possession when an accident is triggered, you can pay 1 million to the bank to prevent yourself from having to move backward on the growth track. So that can be a big deal if you're all the way over here in the red zone. You still have to pay the fine. So effectively, if you were here and an accident was triggered and you played this, you'd have to pay 11 million to the bank, but you wouldn't be moving back 2 spaces to the left on the growth track, so it's probably worth it. I am going to explain how you would hold on to this in a second because you don't actively play it. I haven't talked about that yet. The last action card in the deck is the Advisor, and this one has a dual purpose. The first one is you can use this to pay off one of your loans. So you would play the card, you would play one of your loan cards with it, pay back the 10 million to the bank, and you've gotten rid of this, so you're not going to lose 10 points at the end of the game. You can only pay off one loan at a time. The other function of this card is the ×2, so it's a doubling action. So you play it in combination with any other card to double its effect. So for like the raw materials card, it would make it so you offer twice as many raw materials as allowed by your marker on the market. The hiring, firing, and growth will double the amount of spaces you get to move with just a single card. Innovation lets you move. If you did this, you'd be allowed to move either 2 pegs at one time. You still have to pay the full price, so you pay 10 million euros to the bank to do this. Or you could go 1 and 1 with a single combination of these 2 cards. Waste disposal, you'll move back 6 instead of... I just forgot what number I was at. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. So waste disposal with this, you'd clear out 6 pieces of garbage. Waste removal, you would go back 2, and everyone else gains 2 on their garbage track. The only one that it doesn't double is the order card. The way that the order works is instead of getting twice as much money as you normally would, you're just going to get a bonus +5, and that's what this +5 is on the card. So at the start of the game, you would get 14 million for completing an order. If you played this, then you get 19 million. You still spend just the number of resources that you would need to complete just one order. You're just getting a bonus 5 million euros for it. And you're only creating the amount of garbage equal to where you are on the track once. So the way a game round works is after everybody's drawn their column of 3 cards, they're going to go back and forth starting with the start player playing an action and resolving it. So the start player chooses to innovate, he follows through with the action. The next player chooses to do a thing. The third player chooses to do a thing, it comes back to the start player, he chooses to fill an order, and it goes to the second player, the third player. And now if you have 1 card remaining in your hand, you can choose to flip it face down to show that you are holding it for the next round. And what that means is when you pick 3 more cards from another column, you're going to add this one to it, so you effectively have 4 cards available to you in the next round. You can at any time choose to discard a card instead of playing it as an action if it's just a card that absolutely does you no good. The only exception is the raw materials card must be executed or saved. You can't ever just discard it outright. So if you choose to reserve a card for the following round, this is how you can have a bribery card on hand in case you think an accident might occur when cards are being drawn for the next round. After everybody's gone through and played all their cards, or held onto a card if that's what they chose to do, you'll pay the basic costs of keeping your factory operational, which is, again, referred to by the vertical position of your factory on the main game board. So at the start of the game, everybody has to pay 5 million at the end of the round. Finally, the start player will pass the Euro piece over to the next player, and you're going to start a new round. And the game goes on until someone expands their factory and grows until they get to the 20 column on the growth track. It's worth mentioning that at the end of the game, there will always be one final accident that occurs. So you should always have that in mind when you're trying to decide if you want to end the game or not, or if you see someone ending the game, you should know that an accident will happen at the very end of the game. Scoring at the end of the game is going to be determined by 4 things. First, you're going to have the growth track. You're going to look at the top number over here and say we're the red player, you're going to get 20 points for where we ended up at the growth track. Then you're going to add the state of innovation on 3 tracks over here. So you're going to look at the bottom number underneath each of these pegs, which is going to be 10 plus 15 plus 6 plus that 20. You're also going to get 1 point for every 2 euros you have. So in this case, we've got 14 million, so that would be 7 points for your cash. And then you're going to subtract 10 points for every loan you have. So if you ended up with this, then you're going to lose 30 points. Because this is negative 10, this is a negative 20. So total those numbers up, and that's going to be your score. The person with the highest score at the end of the game is the winner. And in the case of a tie, the player with the most money will be the winner. Because it is, after all, an economic game. Industrial waste.
It's a game about being responsible and taking care of the environment, kind of.
Well, the government will slap you with some big fines and apparently make your factory weaker.
Yeah.
Break you down. I like this game.
I thought it was not bad.
As far as sort of economic balancing games go, it's pretty... I don't know if light is the right word to use, but...
Accessible was the word I was going to use.
Because, there's a stumbling block in learning the game where, like, okay, well, here's all the cards that could come up.
Sure.
And you're like, okay...
And the iconography isn't great.
Like, this gear means that I can option to sell goods and get paid for it. Mm-hmm. And, you're like, it's not intuitive.
Yeah.
Some of them are, like the growth is just, it moves right.
Yeah,
just go right, you get better.
And the firing with the arrow up and down makes sense. But yeah, it's the iconography isn't really intuitive on the cards.
The game, it's older. And so you have to keep that sort of in mind when you're looking at the artwork and stuff. That being said, a game that is... right now 15 years old and probably happened sort of just a few years into when games started becoming a big deal and people started making effort.
The early 21st century kind of gaming renaissance.
This came out the same time as like Carcassonne.
Yeah.
So that's... and Carcassonne, it's pretty old compared... like you look at Carcassonne compared to modern games. So Industrial Waste... you have to sort of, like, give it a break, I guess.
Judge it within its time period to some extent.
That being said, I think it holds up really well.
Yeah. If you hadn't told me that this came out in 2001 when we were playing it, I would have guessed it had come out, 5 years ago.
And, we've played games that are 5 years old that look worse than this.
Yeah.
So...
like, I think that, like, the player boards look good.
I like the pegs, like the hole punched player boards with moving the pegs through. I think that's really nice, and I don't imagine it could have been terribly expensive to make. I think it works really well.
It worked surprisingly well with the upgraded components that we used.
Yeah.
I was surprised that those fit as well as they did, and I felt like they were nice.
Okay.
But
I'm glad that improved your experience. Maybe you'd have a slightly lesser opinion.
Maybe I would.
The real
if I've been playing with the components from 2001.
So tired of these stupid wooden pegs. The euros look good. They look like it's paper money, but it looks like euros.
We have we have strong feelings about paper money in games and how much we hate it. And I felt like it wasn't bad in this.
Yeah. If anything, I think the main board is like the most like bland part about it.
Yeah,
it's
with just
like,
that big grid.
It's just a bar graph.
Yeah, there's nothing there. Yeah, I wish that there was something else happening there that was more visually interesting. But you know, again, that's another thing that you kind of have to give it a break just because it is from 2001 on. Overall, I felt like gameplay worked pretty well. It's not like my favorite... It's not like my new favorite factory-themed game or like ecology waste-themed game, but you know, it's good.
You played a better ecology waste-themed game that you can think of.
Like CO2 is kind of in that, you know, like...
But that's like a completely...
environmental genre.
That's not a comparative. Like, it's a cooperative...
It's a completely different game, yeah. But, you know, just in, like, theme-wise, I'm saying, you know...
I feel like this is going to get compared more to something like Power Grid.
Yeah.
Because it's, like, factories and sort of dry economics kind of focus. And, you know, this plays a lot faster than Power Grid.
Oh, sure.
There's a lot less, like, math going on. I really like the variability of the actions that you can take on any given round. It is constantly fluctuating.
Yeah.
And you might be trying to set yourself up for, okay, next round I need to do this thing.
And
that card just doesn't
come up.
Or you just don't get the chance to pick it.
Yeah, that happened quite a few times during our game, to me at least, where I was like, oh, I want to do that thing, but I can't.
So, it's not the first time I've seen that sort of action selection kind of thing, but it's not overwhelming and not so debilitating, I think, that you can't sort of change your strategy, because
you can always do something.
Yeah. Nothing felt like, oh, I don't want to do any of those things.
Yeah.
There's not really a lot of penalizing actions happening other than, like, spending money to do things, and you're like, well, I need that money for other things.
Yeah.
If anything, I wish the game had a bit more doing things to other people, or maybe more events happening other than just every once in a while the EPA comes out and slaps you. And
it would be nice if there was some kind of other events that were in that deck. I completely agree with you on that.
I don't feel like the game overstayed its welcome. It took us just under an hour and a half to play on our first try. But it did feel like towards the end, you know, you're like, okay, well now everybody's got their factory more or less working smoothly, and we're just going through the motions and just trying to
until someone wins.
Until someone just grows enough that we can finish it off.
Yeah.
So I wish the game either had like a clock, an inbuilt clock of saying, okay, well, now you're just done. If you haven't...
If anybody maxes out their industrial waste, the game ends.
Yeah. You're doing it wrong.
Yeah. Like, I could have ended that game almost 20 minutes before we did end it, maybe. At least, like, 15.
Well, at least, like, the last rounds were amusing because you didn't do it.
Yeah,
like, okay, that's just a silly thing to do.
He's gonna do it.
Alright,
nope.
Just fire off all your staff and then just, like, build up industrial waste.
Just because I knew you guys were, like, 10 points ahead of me or so at that point, and I was like, I gotta make up points somehow. I gotta do something. And I just couldn't make it happen.
Yeah. I looked online, and this is apparently the only game by this designer. Like,
which is interesting. I don't know. Like, I felt like it was successful enough that... I mean, maybe it didn't sell well. I don't know all that much about it.
I don't know. It's out of print now, and hard to... Like, I've rarely ever seen a copy of it anywhere. I really would like to see this get reprinted.
It would be nice.
I would like if someone kind of, like, looked at it and kind of refined some of the mechanics, what we were talking about, like, bring up the graphics so they're more interesting and clean, and then kind of
having more player interaction.
Yeah, like, I think it's still a valid game.
It just kind of needs a little bit of a facelift and an update, and it would be outstanding.
And I think, you know, there are plenty of modern games that aren't as good. So
Yeah, sure.
I wouldn't mind seeing this show up again on people's shelves. So.
Yeah. So, rating on Industrial Waste?
I might give it a 7.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I'd go higher right now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if I played it again, I'm going to say 7.
Yeah, I think that's probably about where I would be.
Yeah.
Maybe just a little bit
under 7. Yeah, I'm sitting there and thinking about it. I'm
like that's 6.75, maybe 7.25, just depending on if you played it a few times, if you felt like it got stale, or if it, grew in depth and you liked it more. But yeah, right around that 7-ish range. So there you go. That is Industrial Waste. If you can grab a copy, it's worth checking out. And hopefully it gets reprinted and we see this game come out again.